Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Well, as you may have heard, the government's sending out checks to most everyone. And a lot of people are waiting for those checks because it's a good thing to get money, especially when it comes from the government. So the bad news is that some banks are taking the stimulus checks to cover overdrawn accounts. And that's business as usual for the banks. But the question is, some people are saying, wait, I was expecting that money and now I've got a problem. So here's how it unwinds. The story I got here is from the New York Post. I saw it in about 20 different newspapers. In fact, I ran this morning a search on Google that said banks taking. So I need to type in and got a million. So this is one of the first ones I saw. Some Americans' stimulus checks are reportedly disappearing because their banks are taking the money. Now, the banks have a reason to do this. The question is whether they should be doing this now. Some banks are putting customers' deposits from the federal government toward negative balances in their accounts, leaving those taxpayers with nothing. This is also reported in the New York Times. The New York Post cites them. USAA, which is a financial services company that serves people in the military, kept $2,400 from a Minneapolis woman and her disabled veteran husband because their account was overdrawn. That was what the paper said. The woman was reportedly planning to use the money to pay rent and to buy formula for her infant daughter. Another man in South Carolina told the Times that Safe Federal Credit Union kept his entire $1,200 stimulus payment to help pay back an account that was overdrawn by $2,600. They said that they'd done that, but he said it was simply because he'd forgotten to cancel a pair of music subscriptions. And now something like that, which was so trivial back in the day, suddenly becomes so important. Another woman had to battle with her credit union in Massachusetts to keep the $2,400 that she and her husband were due to receive. The credit union reportedly kept $1,000 at first because of an overdrawn account, but they finally changed their mind and released the money after the customer called multiple times. And that might be the takeaway here, that if you become the squeaky wheel, you might be able to get someone to change their mind on this. Now, the bill that was passed by Congress last month totaled about $2.2 trillion, and a portion of that is these checks being sent out to people. Now, it largely protects the payments from state or federal debt collection, debt collectors. But the feds have told banks that technically there's nothing to stop them from taking the money to pay off outstanding debts that they're owed. So there's a distinction there. And so a lot of people have apparently run their bank accounts into the negative, and the banks have let them do this. And so now when the $1,200 comes in, the bank just goes, oh, well, you're in the negative. We'll just unnegative you $1,200. That could spell trouble for more than 39 million Americans who had racked up at least one fee in the past year for having insufficient funds or overdrawing their bank account, according to a study by the 2018 Pew Charitable Trust Report. J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America have all said they will refrain from grabbing the money. The three banking giants pledged to pause their collections on negative balances or to give credits to people with overdrawn accounts. J.P. Morgan spokesperson Ann Pace said, "We hope this gives them a chance to catch their breath." So that's interesting. I mentioned before about how the insurance companies, automobile insurance companies right now, many of them are refunding or rebating premiums because they said, well, people are driving less, we're going to rebate these premiums. And I pointed out at the time that if they didn't do that, they'd probably be forced to do that by regulators. And since I did that first video, California, and I did a video on this, California's come out and basically said, yes, insurance companies have to refund or rebate premiums because of the lessened risks that we have right now with a lot of things such as automobile insurance. But the interesting thing here is that if you have a bank account, and you've got money in the bank account, you can withdraw your own money. And if you've got a system in place where you can drop below zero and go into the negative, if you look at the agreement that allows you to do that, I'm reasonably certain the agreement's going to say that when you put money into the account and you're in a negative situation, the money you put in goes to fill up the negative situation before it gives you a surplus. Now, I'm not saying that the banks shouldn't cut you some slack. I hope they do. I think that'd be the good thing for them to do. The PR they would get out of that would be amazing. Think about Wells Fargo. Think about Bank of America. Those bank names are the kinds of businesses that have not gotten a lot of good press in the last 4 or 5 years, Wells Fargo in particular. And so anything they can do right now to clean up their image a little bit would probably go a long way. And people tend to remember these things. So, if Wells Fargo a couple years ago opened up some dummy bank accounts in your name and took money from you, yeah, that'll leave a very bad taste in your mouth that would probably stay there for quite a while. Now, if you're still with them and suddenly they cut you some slack and said, you know something, the money's in the account, the account's negative, we're still going to let you have the money. We'll worry about the negative thing later. That's the kind of favor that people will actually remember and go, you know something, that I will remember. So I would hope that other banks would do this too. The problem, of course, is that the law doesn't require them to. And while a insurance regulator at the state level can step up and say, hey, insurance companies that are doing business in our state must do the following, otherwise they'll draw scrutiny from us that they might not like. And they have the leverage to do that, by the way. Most state regulators in insurance are allowed to look at the amount of premiums being brought in and the amount of payments being sent out. And if there appears to be a wild imbalance there, the insurance regulators can say, okay, we got a problem here and resolve that. But this one is such a simple basic math situation, okay? You've got an account. Here's the positive, here's the negative, and you run it down to here, and now money goes into the account. The money would normally go here. So I don't know that they could actually come out and lean on them legally to force them to do that. But it would be a great PR move right now. So I'll give you, I mentioned before, I've actually got bank accounts at 3 different banks because my personal, my banking, my lawyers are required to have a trust account and so on. And so it's not uncommon that I could have them all at one bank if I wanted to, but just the way things have evolved and I've moved around so much, I've wound up with accounts at 3 different banks. And I've left them there and I like them where they are. And I've gotten pretty decent treatment most of the time. I did a video called Fun with Banks, but that's another story altogether. But the point is that if I was in a situation right now where one of those banks treated me better and another bank didn't, I'd have no problem at all just closing that account and putting it all over here. So I would think that banks right now should look around and go, okay, the whole country is financially hurting. The whole country is financially hurting. And let's face it, the banks are going to get bailout money from the same stimulus that you got the $1,200 check from. And most people know that too. So most people are going, wait a second. You're getting a bailout probably of a gigantic figure. And I got a bailout of $1,200. And you took my $1,200 while also taking the bailout from the government. That wouldn't look good either. So, like I said, legally, at this moment in time, I don't think there's much that you could do if your bank did that except to complain. And like I said, they might take care of you that way. But I would hope that banks would recognize what a horrible PR move it is these days to take that money and say, well, hey, your account's a negative, $1,200. We took $1,200. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're taking a gigantic check, the big, novelty check from the government for tens of millions of dollars or whatever it is. So there you go. So just be on the lookout and be aware of the fact that if the money's going straight into your account, you might want to check to see if it shows up and what happens to it, because some banks are taking stimulus checks for overdrawn accounts. Questions, accounts, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I don't know why. It's a perfectly cromulent word.